Everyone, welcome back to FPL Fran. Today's video is going to be my game week 1 updated draft. As you guys know, I did do a first draft almost on the first day of FPL coming out. I've changed my opinions on certain players. I've changed my opinions specifically on the defenders and the midfielders because of how accessible these sort of C-bit points are. And I've fundamentally, I think, changed my draft from a defense perspective, which has trickled down into my attack. What I will say at this moment in time too is I think it's still valid to spend a lot of money on defense, but then actually just thinking about how strong C-bits are, I've lost a little bit of the love for the City type asset, the Arsenal type asset, and moved into a lot of sort of 5.0, 5.5 bracket type of player. And I'm quite happy to almost live there. On top of that, I'd also say there are still some 4.0s, and this kind of goes against some of my advice within the rating your draft video. Well, not really. I think a 4.0 is viable if you, let's say, have 4 extremely strong defenders, but it's a little bit different if you're going for, let's say, 2, 3 cheapish defenders, and then you still have a 4.0 in there somehow. I think that's a huge difference to what I'm sort of pursuing here with a very sort of strong defensive setup. Part of the sort of experience of changing the draft as well has been aided as well by Fantasy Football Hub's new Rate Your Team AI tool. It's not new, obviously, it's just new for the new preseason. It's been updated for things like DEFCON. Obviously, the minutes of players are still sort of expected to change around. I think when I sort of ran my draft and I ran the rating wasn't great, I'll be honest. I think the rating was something like 88. And I think that's because Tarkowski right now is still quote unquote injured. But if he's ready to play for game week 1, he'll be in my draft, right? That's sort of the assumption that I'm taking here. Whereas obviously the model's taking a little bit of a cautious approach. It doesn't really see Tarkowski as being available to play. Obviously, it'll get updated with more information to come. Now, as far as, let's say, looking at game week 1, I think my draft isn't very strong for a bench boost 1, and you'll notice that because I don't have a rotation goalkeeper, and equally, I do really have a weak bench, in my opinion, for game week 1. And part of this is because I think there's 2 camps, right? I've seen the sort of Ben Crellin type camp where he is looking to bench boost 1, doesn't really care about the chip, and I think we shouldn't care about the chip, and he's happy to get rid of it. But I think in my case, I feel like with some of the experience that I have, and I'm not saying Ben's wrong. I think I would definitely consider pursuing bench boost 1, even within the sort of team that I have here debuted. But I think the idea that I have in my mind is, as the season goes on, and I'm hoping the second quarter of the season when I get to use my wild card, that we will get a bit more of a grasp of the game, get a bit more of a grasp for who are the good rotation pieces. And by the time we do wild card 2, I should hopefully have a natural sort of looking bench boost with my sort of affinity for rotation that will be very strong and be better than, I guess, forcing my draft around the bench boost 1, as opposed to what I'm doing now, which is creating a strong draft, which happens to have rotation. The other thing that I've changed is I've, I guess, moved away from the 4.54, not because I think the 3-5-2 is poor. I think it's actually a really strong formation, and arguably my team is a 3-5-3, right, where there's 8 attackers, but I still like the idea of having those attackers in because I don't necessarily see the need to get towards that sort of 9 million price point, which is the Watkins price point. It's also the Bruno price point in the midfield position, and then it's also the Gyökeres price point. If you want to sort of move Watkins on in a few weeks' time and suddenly Gyökeres looks like absolute flavor of the month, he's just come out in the game, then that makes sense. But I think for now, I'm quite comfortable spending a lot of my money within the midfield, as I did my first draft, with a little bit of tapering on defense. As I said, if you want to get your draft rated by Fantasy Football Hub's AI tool, have a look in the link in the description below. It's really easy. All you have to do is upload a screenshot of your draft. So you can take a photo of it from the FPL app, or you can take a screenshot of it on the web app itself, and it should sort itself out. I used it for the Rate Your Team's draft video, and it's a really simple, fun tool to just get a feel for what a third-party model has on your draft. All right, so jumping into things right now, my draft has changed a lot on defense. It starts with the goalkeeping position. I still have Valdemarsson, not a relevant pick at 4.0, but Sanchez is the goalkeeper that I've actually gone for. And the reason why I've gone for Sanchez is the expected clean sheets for Chelsea just are that good. I was actually looking at the best rotation pairs in the game. To my mind, the best 4.5 rotation pair to start the season is probably going to be Petrovic plus Areola or Petrovic plus Kelleher. And I just couldn't quite get there. I think the expected clean sheets are better for Chelsea. Arguably, they're still slightly underpriced in the goalkeeping position. Their defense was really, really strong to close out the season, remained strong in the Club World Cup, except for the game versus Flamengo, if you saw that. But I'm happy to go with Sanchez at this moment in time. It doesn't seem like he'll be deposed Yes, of course, there have been some games previously where Sanchez, lost out in minutes, but I think Jorgensen was given chances last season. I can't see Sanchez necessarily losing too many minutes this year, although you could say that there's going to be more rotation this year. I just think that Sanchez is most likely to be first choice across the field. And then in defense, but equally, sorry, before we jump into that as well, I think I'm totally comfortable switching into that 4.5 rotation pattern, if only just to sort of enable a bench boost one. And I haven't fully determined my mind on that. It's just that I'm not someone who thinks that it's not okay to bench boost in the second quarter of the season. I think it's totally fine. So in defense, I'll actually go with Munoz, Lacroix, and then I'll go with Tarkowski, Rodon, and Murillo. So the reason why I've gone for this is because if you guys have watched the defender's cheat sheet, and I can put the graphic up as well, but these players are amazing CBIT players, right? Lacroix is one of the best. Tarkowski is the best. Murillo is probably the second best. I think based on CBIT per 90, Murillo might just be a little bit ahead of Tarkowski, but like these are the best picks, right? And I really think that at the price points they're at, they're all worth it, right? Nottingham Forest's run to start the season is just amazing. So I think that's why Murillo finds himself into my draft. I'm totally fine with going Nico Williams, plus maybe going for a 4.5. But I kind of thought it was a bit cute going for Rodon and Murillo, just because I don't see myself necessarily playing the 4.5 option too much. And then I've actually got 4 really good players who can always be 3. So the idea behind 4 stacked defenders is I'm not planning to play a 4-4-2 all the time, but actually it plays itself really easily into a 3-5-2 or 3-4-3 every week. And how does this work, right? For example, in game week 1, I don't really want to be playing my Crystal Palace defenders versus Chelsea away, so it's an easy bench for the both of them. I play Tarkowski, Rodon, and Murillo. And then when it comes to, let's say, game week 2, for example, that's a much tougher game for Murillo because he's facing Crystal Palace away. So I actually just double stack Crystal Palace defense. I play Tarkowski, I bench Rodon. In game week 3, for example, that's a pretty tough week once again for Crystal Palace because it's Aston Villa away. So the plan is just to play Munoz in some of the tougher games where he also has that attacking edge. Even though he's got slightly less CBIT compared to Lacroix, I think that just edges things out. So happy to bench Lacroix in situations like that. And then, going forward, Murillo actually has a really tough match in game week 4. So he's got Arsenal away in game week 4. And then actually in game week 5, Tarkowski, for example, has Liverpool away. So I'm totally comfortable playing all the other players there. The idea is every week, in theory, I've sort of worked out a rotation plan around these players that I feel quite comfortable with. In the midfield, you'll actually notice that there's nothing different to the first draft, I believe. I've gone with Rodgers, I've gone with Palmer, I've gone with Salah, Sarr, and NDI. Now, Sarr is probably the pick that could still go, Rodgers as well, because I think Rodgers' price point is a bit of a weird one, where if I felt like I had a lot more money to spend in the game, I'd probably push him towards Saka if I really wanted to, because Saka gives me a game week 2 captaincy that's really strong, probably better than any of the other options I have, including Palmer versus West Ham away. Or I kind of ignore Saka, hope that he's maybe slightly worse off because of Gyökeres taking small bits of pen share unless we're certain about it. I still think Saka is going to be on penalties. I think it's his choice to most likely lose penalties. He might even have to lose them through missing, but who knows, right? Arteta's already spoken that Gyökeres is definitely within the pecking order, and that changes things. With Rodgers, I just think when you look at the start of the season for Aston Villa, the games are amazing. And I don't have Konsa here, and part of that is because I do think at the 4.5 position, there's a lot of really good picks that have CBITs that actually do better than him. And then equally at the 5 and 5.5 position, I mean, I'll play all of these players every single week over Konsa in most situations, right? And then going back to the point with Rodgers, I just feel like he's extremely strong, extremely stable. I already have 2 6.5 players that I really like. I don't have Elliot Anderson here, who a lot of people have recently pivoted towards Elliot Anderson. He features really highly within just my own estimations. Part of this, I think, is because I'm not spending as much money in the forward position as other people are, which is why I'm comfortable spending that money on Rodgers instead in the midfield. I guess if you asked me to pick between, let's say, Watkins and a Rodgers, I'd probably be comfortable just owning Rodgers and then actually going with some of the other forwards that I've chosen. But that's just me, right? A lot of people actually have both, and I think that's fine. Some people actually just have Watkins because it's an easy pivot to Gyökeres, as I mentioned previously. But once again, I don't think Gyökeres is going to be that impactful at the start of the season just because he needs to be working his way up to fitness. There's probably enough time for me to build up enough transfers to actually move towards Gyökeres after game week 2, right? Because if I miss game week 2, I miss Leeds at home. I don't really need an Arsenal player up until a little bit later into the season, maybe around game week 5/6. So that's kind of why I feel like I've got enough space to breathe. And owning Rodgers is never going to feel bad in FPL because he's a player who's actually fundamental to his team. He's a talisman. He plays every minute as much as possible or close to it, even in the midst of a Champions League season. Now they don't have Champions League. The focus should really be in the Premier League for Rodgers, and I think that's only a better thing. With NDI, he actually is really, really good for Seabrit. And we showed that within the midfield position in the cheat sheet. He also has at least some attacking sort of open play share. Not too bad fixtures here and there. And ultimately is a penalty taker, which I think is absolutely crucial. Palmer, Salah, we don't really need to talk too much about them. I think I'm very comfortable in going Palmer over Saka. That's just a personal choice. And Sar, he has some really poor fixtures, but I think the idea behind the 3-4-3 as well that can be played at times is I can rotate, right? So that's exactly the point of this. So that leads me towards the forward position. I'll be going Welbeck, Solanke, and Strand Larsen. And I'm sure a lot of people will take issue with not going Watkins, maybe not going Wood, or even, let's say, going for a Bowen, right? I think part of the reason why I'm going for this is Solanke really should be benefiting from Son leaving. He seems like he's on his way out to LAFC. But that will mean he's on penalties, which I think just immediately shoots up Solanke to being an elite pick that's actually underpriced. And we do have faith in Thomas Frank, at least. And it just depends on whether Solanke's fit for game week 1, right? The big news about Solanke is that he was only taken or, prevented from playing the previous friendly match because of precaution. Someone like Udogi, for example, who actually suffered an injury, has actually sort of been excluded from the Asian tour, right? So that actually suggests an actual injury, whereas Solanke is still within the squad, and I think he should be fine. Strand Larsen, I think, just as a pick who can stand from game week 1 to 10. Yes, of course, there are some poor fixtures in there, which is why we have rotation. Same with Welbeck. I'm comfortable with these sorts of picks. The pick or the player that I suppose like the least in this draft is Welbeck. But I think looking across the board, what are some other picks around these sort of price points that I quite like? I think Evan Nilsson is still strong, but he's got tough fixtures too, not necessarily on penalties either. Igor Thiago is really good, and he's actually cheaper than Welbeck. So I can definitely see myself moving towards an Igor Thiago instead of a Welbeck, just to sort of open up the season, because Brighton do have some pretty tough games after that Fulham at home opening game, whereas Strand Larsen just has a really clean run of games, generally speaking, between game weeks 1 to 10. So if I'm aiming for a later wild card, I'm totally comfortable going Strand Larsen, whereas Welbeck's the one who could probably leave my draft and also give me 0.5 back somewhere to spend. And maybe that money goes into improving someone like Rodon to a 4.5, or pushing myself to a 5.5, or having rotation within the goalkeeping position that's beyond the 4.5 rotation stack. So that's kind of where I'm at with my draft. Part of the reason for going for this draft is I think I'm generally quite fond of C-Bits. I think they're quite reproducible. Just looking at a lot of the players last season, you can see as long as you play for a certain team, for a certain, I guess, tactical structure and setup, and a lot of those things I would imagine won't change. Like, for example, Nottingham Forest, a lot of people are expecting for them to do a lot more poorly this season. And I think that's totally acceptable as a take, because I don't think they were ever actually that great of a team to begin with. But the key thing is, if you give them good fixtures, if you give them really the same setup, a similar sort of team, can they perform that much worse compared to the expectations? Or are there still guarantees there with things like CBIT? So, there could still be matches where I'm conceding a goal per game, but I'm still getting 4 points. And that still sort of ekes out versus some of the players who get an attacking return every, let's say, 4 or 5 matches. And that makes a huge difference. So I really think CBITs are there. I think the expected clean sheets from the teams that I've chosen, generally speaking, are quite good. Like, these are mid-table defenses. These are not defenses that are going to be, well, hopefully not, but these are not defenses right now that we have sort of pictured as relegation level defenses. If anything, Crystal Palace is a team that ended the season really strong, if you want to sort of go on the basis of form. Sure, Nottingham Forest pretty much exhibited the opposite of that. But yeah, I'm happy to be invested into these sorts of squads. And generally speaking, I think, yes, the draft can change a couple times. I've seen a lot of people also move towards maybe a Haaland draft as of late, and I think it makes a lot of sense, right? The projections are close enough where if you are a risk-taking person, I can see yourself going for Haaland draft. I can even see some of the Nomium drafts, I suppose. But will I go there? I don't think so, because I do think Salah is still a really strong, stable captaincy on almost every other week, right? And Palmer fills in a lot of the gaps that may be outside of game week 2, like Saka would do it a little bit better. So that's kind of where I'm at right now with my draft. Pretty happy with this team. Expected clean sheets for the goalkeepers, a mixture of CBIT, small or decent expected clean sheet percentage within the defense. In the midfield, stable options like Rodgers, who I think can never let you down. Sarr, who I think is a little bit underpriced compared to sort of the attacking returns. And I'm expecting to hold on to someone like Sarr once again for more than 5 weeks, right? So if he kind of stinks it up in the first 5 weeks, that's fine, because Crystal Palace's fixtures aren't that good. But am I comfortable holding him up until maybe my first wild card? Yes. NDI is one of those picks where I think he could be shifted on. But that's kind of where I'm at with my drafts, right? I really wanted to go this year with a draft that feels like you don't have to change too many things around with the draft. I really want to be stacking up some transfers this season, because I do think that was a mistake that I operated with early on last season. Not in terms of the actual transfers that I made, but just putting myself in a position where I had to force transfers because I picked some pretty volatile picks in terms of their minutes. But that's it. That's my Game Week 1 updated draft. Hopefully nothing changes too much soon. I'm sure I'll reevaluate my thoughts when we have more information around preseason, more information around, how good certain players' minutes are as we close into Game Week 1, like maybe a Gyökeres, for example, or even some injuries like Solanke getting a serious injury, right? So things like that. We'll see what happens. But take care. Goodbye. I'll see you guys in the next video.